who are going to be here today. UMass Lowell is very, very proud to be the host of this debate. It's an important one for all of us, and in particular because we know that the person who represents the 3rd Congressional District is important to this university and to our students. The 3rd Congressional District, as you know, represents 36 cities and towns, ranging from Haverhill all the way to Ashburnham. They represent, in particular, Lowell and a big part of the Merrimack Valley. This representative plays an important leadership role in this city, in this region, and in this state. And that role is as an important advocate for our interests. We at UMass Lowell look to always have a strong, positive relationship with our member of Congress. We know it is competitive nationally for resources. We know that the policies and laws enacted federally can affect all of us locally. We've seen how strong partnerships can benefit our students directly and long-term can have a big impact on our health, on our environment, and on economic development. And more importantly, as a university, we recognize that as a nation, it is important that our young people understand the importance of participation in the democratic process. This election is important to them. Our students, 3 of whom you see in front of you today who will be participating directly in this debate, they care about how federal policies and politics affect higher education and financial aid. They care about issues like sustainability and healthcare and equity. I know that we're looking to hear what these candidates today have to say and what these candidates will be talking about through the last few weeks of this campaign. We here at UMass Lowell are extremely proud of the city and the region and of partnering and supporting our community in a multitude of ways. And for that reason, we're particularly pleased to host this forum today. And now, I'd like to introduce your moderator for tonight, John Claverius. John is an Associate Director of the UMass Lowell Center for Public Opinion and is a professor in our Political Science Department. And his expertise, appropriately for tonight, is American politics and political methodology. John?
Good here? Thank you. Thank you so much, Madam Chancellor, and thank you all for joining us, especially the candidates. But as a professor, I'd like to introduce the people who are most important to this debate, and that is our wonderful student panel. First of all, I'd like to introduce Courtney Mayer, a graduate fellow of Student Activities and Leadership. Shakira Fedna of our Student Government Association Executive Board. And Mike Carpentier of the Greek Council e-board. I will ask some questions from this podium and try to steer the debate as we sort of move off of some of the questions that we've developed. The students will ask the bulk of the questions for this debate. And so for what you all have come here, let me introduce our 2 candidates this evening, Congresswoman Trahan and Senator Dean Tran. Thank you. The coin tosses determine the order of opening statements. And each candidate will give an opening statement of 2 minutes each, I believe. Congresswoman Trahan, let's go first.
Great. Well, thank you so much, John. Thank you so much to the university, Chancellor, our student panel, and everybody who came here tonight. It is great to be back at the university for this important debate. So it has been an honor of my life to serve the constituents of the 3rd Congressional District. As many of you know, I grew up right down the road in a family that lived paycheck to paycheck. My dad was a union iron worker. My mom, she juggled several part-time minimum wage jobs while helping raise my 3 sisters and me. And I know, and I think about every day, what the rising costs are doing to families like the one I grew up in. We could not have afforded a 40% increase in any one of our bills. It would have been devastating for our family. And that is why, in the depths of the pandemic, I worked hard and passed relief to come to our workers, to our families, to our small businesses, getting shots in arms so that we could reopen our businesses and reopen our schools and get kids back in the classroom where they belong. It's the reason why we passed the bipartisan infrastructure law, so that we could finally replace the North Bridge, which many of you, I'm sure, have to travel over today, and clean up the Merrimack River, which is right now in jeopardy because so much raw sewage is flowing into it. But we didn't stop there. We passed laws to decrease the cost of health care in this country and decrease the cost of prescription drugs. I look forward to continuing that work.
Quick indication on the timer. The timer will ding at 30 seconds and indicate on a yellow light, and then the second, louder, more irritating ding will indicate when the time is up.
So I can keep going?
Yeah, please get 30 more seconds and there you go.
So we know we have a lot more work to do. We have a lot more work to reduce the costs for hardworking families who are struggling to make ends meet. But I'll tell you, I wake up every day with the lens of hardworking families in my mind's eye to get to work around the clock to make sure we're putting them in a better position for themselves and their families. And I'd be honored to continue to do that work. Thank you.
Senator Tran, 2 minutes opening, and again, the timer will ding at 30 seconds first, and then a louder one when your time is up.
Great. First of all, thank you very much, Professor Cluverius, the student panel, as well as Chancellor Chen and UMass Law for hosting this debate. Thank you to the audience here and at home, watching and listening. I want to give you guys an insight into who I am. My name is Dean Tran. I am a husband and a father of 4, one of whom is a UMass graduate. I served 4 terms. I served 4 years on the planning board and 6 terms on the Fitchburg City Council as the first minority elected in the city, as well as the first Vietnamese American elected in this state. And then I went on to serve 2 terms in the state Senate as the first minority elected in the district, the first Vietnamese American elected to the state legislature, and the first refugee and Asian-born American to be elected to the state Senate. Now, I am the first Asian American to run for the U.S. Congress representing this district and this state. Our country is going through a very, very difficult time. A time in which people are suffering to make ends meet. We find ourselves in a time in which people are struggling financially and having to choose between paying for a gallon of oil or a gallon of milk or even a gallon of gas. You know, the American people cannot provide for their families to put on the food on their tables. Now as the winter season is around the corner, people have to choose between eating and heating. The people, especially the elder and the poor, are having to endure a tremendous hardship. And the hardship was intentionally created by my opponent and her Democrat colleagues, through personal greed, failed policies, and putting our country last. And this hardship doesn't have to happen. So I have a very strong record of serving and working for the people, and I intend to bring this record to the U.S. Congress and represent the people and put this country first.
Before we get to our student questions, I have to say, as a professor of political science, I hate that I have to ask this question, but it is, democratic accountability depends not only on having free and fair elections, but also that elections have a clear winner and loser, and that the loser consents to the outcome of the election. So tonight on this stage, will each of you pledge that if you are certified as the loser of this election, that you will concede to your opponent and accept the results?
Yes.
Absolutely, Professor.
Great, thank you. Let's move on. Let's move on to questions. First, let's go to Courtney Mann.
House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy recently said that if Republicans win control of the House of Representatives, the GOP will use raising the debt limit as leverage to force spending cuts on entitlement programs, which would include cuts to Medicare and Social Security. Would you support or oppose cuts to Social Security and Medicare?
Senator Tran, let's go first.
Well, thank you very much for that question, Courtney. No, I do not support making cuts to Medicare or Social Security, because I know a lot of people who are on fixed income, and they depend on Social Security. As a matter of fact, the latest increase of 8% to our recipients who are receiving Social Security, I support that. Because of the high inflation, the core inflation rate, they're saying that it's not going to stop. It hasn't peaked yet. And the problem that we're seeing with inflation is a problem that my opponent and her colleagues have created.
Congresswoman, 1 minute.
No, we have worked hard to strengthen Social Security and Medicare. Both of my parents are on each. And look, Kevin McCarthy is going to attack, destabilize, privatize Social Security. He's been clear about this. It is the reason why we can't afford to lose the majority in the House, because too many lives are at stake when we start tinkering with those programs that work and keep our seniors, safe and secure. Not only that, we've made steps to reduce the cost of prescription drugs for our seniors, capping their out-of-pocket expense at $2,000 and their price of insulin at $35. That is all at risk if Kevin McCarthy is the Speaker of the House.
Let me add to what I said, Courtney, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
And that is,
30 seconds.
Representative Kevin McCarthy can say whatever he wants to say. As a representative of this district, I represent the people. I don't represent the party. And I have a strong record up in the state Senate that I do not vote with the party, with the leadership, but my opponent there vote with Nancy Polito 100% of the time.
Great. I want to get into, before we move on to Shakira, I want to talk a little bit more about inflation, which is an issue that I think has been on every voter's mind throughout this campaign. Both of you addressed the problems that many residents in this district are facing, and that every resident has faced increasing prices in food, in home heating, which is now expected on average to be at least 10% higher, but even higher for those of us who use fuel oil. You talked a lot about the problems in both of your statements. What solutions do you have for the increased prices that your future constituents will face? Let's go with Congresswoman Trahan first. 1 minute.
Thank you, John. There's no question that the rising costs are really hurting our families. This is a global inflation issue, right? Countries are suffering all across the globe, as well as, from the Putin's unnecessary and unprovoked war. But what we have done is we've taken steps to decrease the prices, reduce the cost for hardworking families. We've decreased the price of prescription drugs. We have voted to decrease the cost of your utility bills and your energy bills. I have to say, we just put another $1 billion into our home heating assistance program. 37 million of it is going to come to Massachusetts, but that's not all. I just today asked the Biden administration to release the home heating oil reserves here in New England so that by increasing the supply, we can reduce the cost for families as we approach winter. And we're going to keep making those investments. So we have to keep investing in relief. We have to do whatever we can to reduce those costs for families. And then long term, we have to tackle the issue of our supply chains.
Senator Tran, 1 minute, solutions for inflation.
Thank you, Professor. And I have to correct you. It's not the inflation that we're going through. It's a Biden inflation. And it is something that was created by the president and helped by the Congresswoman. The solution to this is reduce government spending, make America energy independent, And if you ask me if the inflation was not created by my opponent and the Democrats, let me use this quote. And the quote came from Obama economic advisor, Larry Summers. And he said, well actually, Steve Ratner, and he said, the original sin was the 1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan, the bill almost completely unfunded that was contributed materially to today's inflation level. That was the bill that my opponent voted for. That was the bill that she's going around this district doing photo ops, and that is the bill that has caused so much hardship on the American people here, not just in this district.
Inflation, right? I mean, everybody wants to have a buzzword and have some catchy phrase as they head into election season to incite fear in folks. This is a global problem that is the result of a global pandemic. And I resent the fact that we've got legislators who want to be lawmakers in Washington who aren't willing to come to the table with serious solutions, and they want to capitalize on the pain of hardworking families in order to get elected.
Professor, Professor, this is a very important issue, and it's an issue that is affecting everyone's lives, not just in this district, but it's across the country. It's not a global inflation. It's an inflation that was created by our President Biden and you. And you know, it's an inflation that was caused by your failed energy policies. And here's another quote from former President President Obama's economic advisor, Larry Summers, on energy costs. He said, Biden made a mistake by canceling the Keystone Pipeline, showing down and being a hostile country to natural gas. Okay.
Next question comes from Shakira Fetna.
What is the biggest asset the 3rd Congressional District has to offer, and how can you, as a member of Congress, help to make that asset even stronger?
Senator.
Thank you, Professor. The biggest asset that we have in this district is diversity. I love it. You know, I represent the city of Fitchburg, which is very diverse, like this city of Lowell. My senatorial district is also diverse, and this congressional district is very diverse. And that diversity makes me unique, because I can relate to everyone in this district, whether you're poor or you've worked your way up to the middle class, whether you're a refugee, an immigrant, or a citizen, whether you face discrimination and racism. I have gone through all that, and I can relate to every single person in this district, and I would say that diversity is what makes this district so great.
Thank you. Well, clearly the greatest asset of the 3rd Congressional District is its people. You know, I grew up here in the city of Lowell. I'm the granddaughter of immigrants, both from Brazil and from Portugal. And I've seen the impact and the contributions that our immigrants have made across all of our communities. And I get excited when we pass the CHIPS and Science Act, and we're on the cusp of bringing American manufacturing right back home, not just home to America, to this region of the state. I get excited when I talk about a semiconductor cluster that UMass Lowell is going to lead right here in this part of the state, because we have the ingenuity in our people, the drive of this fantastic district, and we already have the bones to lead once again in manufacturing and in semiconductors.
Great. Thank you. All right. Next question comes from Mike Carpentier.
What specific needs have you identified in the 3rd District, and how will you address them?
Congresswoman Trahan.
We're addressing them right now, right? The bipartisan infrastructure deal was something I was talking about well before I got elected. The Rourke Bridge, which is a 40-year temporary bridge, the sewage that's been flowing into the Merrimack River, PFAS that's infiltrated our water systems and prevented some of our towns from having the assurance that they're drinking clean water. Not to mention our roads that are in disrepair, our intersections that are no longer safe, public transit that is just decrepit. That is why we passed the bipartisan infrastructure deal. Administrations, Republican and Democrat, have been trying to do it for decades, but this Congress, this administration, we got it done. And as a result, $170 million to the Rourke Bridge is going to be replaced. After years, 40 years, the Vassilier Bridge in Haverhill, bridges all over my opponent's hometown in Fitchburg. These are important investments that are going to unleash the economic development that our communities are craving coming out of this pandemic.
Senator Tran, 1 minute.
You know, infrastructure is important. I was a ranking member on the Transportation Committee in the State Senate, and I would agree if it was not 2022 year. You know, my opponent voted for the infrastructure bill, which is $1.2 trillion spending pork bill. Only a fraction of that went to infrastructure. Now, the most important thing, the most important issue right now to the people across the district and across the country is inflation, making sure that people are able to work, provide for their families, put food on the table, make sure they're able to pay their bills, pay for fuel. Winter's around the corner. And we're seeing electricity going up 64%, 164% from National Grid and Unitil. How the hell are they going to pay for that? We need to focus on those issues and make sure that they can help themselves.
30 seconds, Congresswoman.
We had 19 Republicans in the Senate join us on the bipartisan infrastructure deal because it's a smart investment. When Dean Tran was a state senator, he would call me begging for money to repair Route 2, right? To not vote for this bill, frankly, is disqualifying to these communities.
She mentioned my name, so I need to
Yes.
respond to that. The infrastructure bill is $1.2 trillion. 550 goes to the infrastructure, but only $110 billion went to roads and bridges. Now, my opponent, Congresswoman, I did call you. Thank you very much for reminding me, because I called you regarding the work in the Route 2 bridge, and you did nothing in the infrastructure bill.
Excuse me, I don't know if you saw this, but the governor sat with me at the university here to announce that $170 million is going to replace the road.
This is a very important issue, Professor, and you know, thank you to Governor Baker for allocating that money to the Rourke Bridge, because she did not secure that in the infrastructure bill. And second of all, Route 2 is the economic driver for North Central Massachusetts. I spoke to her, and I mentioned to her, and I had Governor Baker promise me to do a feasibility study, and she did nothing in the infrastructure bill for North Central Massachusetts.
First of all, the money is going to come over the next 5-year period. Projects are getting approved as we speak. I am going to fight for North Central Massachusetts as hard as I'm going to fight for the Merrimack Valley, because there is enough money in this bill to go around. And frankly, you know, in the last administration, we talked about Infrastructure Week every day. We almost were on like the cusp of celebrating it. We had the ribbons out and everything, and it didn't get done. It got done under this administration, it got done with this Congress, and these communities, these 37 communities in the 3rd Congressional District, are finally going to get the investment from the federal government that they deserve.
Congresswoman, thank you very much for whatever you did. I promise to work even harder than you.
So let's move on to another question from Courtney Mayer.
What can the federal government do to ensure that more American students leave high school with a higher proficiency in civics than they currently do?
Congresswoman.
I think it's a great question, and Massachusetts is frankly leading in this area to, you know, reinstitute civics back in our school systems. It is important as we, you know, enter voting season, right? This is an election season. We want everyone to understand that they have the power to vote, that it's the most important power that we give every individual in this country. We also want to know, we want our students at a young age to know how to engage with offices like mine or state representative offices to advocate for the issues that they care about. Now, on the federal side, Look, we've given a lot of money to our school systems. One thing, as a first generation graduate from college, I am focused on college affordability because I see what it did for me in my life. My husband went to the Greater Lowell Vocational School right across the river, and I want to make sure that there are pathways available for kids who want to pursue a college education, people who want to learn a trade, people who want an apprenticeship in one of our fabulous trades unions here in New England. That is the path to economic opportunity, and we need to be funding all of it.
Thank you, Courtney, for that question. Saying one thing, but doing it is another. Because in the State Senate, I've done it. I've worked with my colleagues in the State Senate to pass the civic bill, which allows the teaching of civics in our high schools. One of the things that I made sure was that when we're teaching civics, that we teach it unbiasedly. And I'm very proud of that fact. And if I'm elected to this U.S. Congress, I'm going to bring that record to the U.S. Congress and to make sure that on the federal level, that we continue to make sure that our school teach civics to our students.
So before we move on to another student question, I have a question for both of you. The members of Congress have already proposed in the House a ban on all abortions at the 15th week of pregnancy. And I can tell you that as a pollster, initial evaluations of that ban suggest that it is somewhat popular in the country, though most likely less popular in this district. Would you vote yes or no on that ban? Senator.
Thank you, Professor. I would vote no. And the reason why I would vote no is because I believe, when I served in the State Senate, I believe there are issues that belong to the federal level, as well as there are issues that belong to the state government. And abortion is a very invasive medical procedure. That should be left up to the patient and the healthcare provider to decide. But the regulations, including healthcare regulations, should be left up to the state to decide. And to answer your question, Professor, no, I would not agree with that.
Congresswoman Trahan, 1 minute.
Well, of course, I would not vote on a ban. I voted much the opposite to codify Roe in the week after the Dobbs decision was issued by the Supreme Court. A decision that my opponent actually celebrated, and by the way, didn't vote for the Roe Act here in Massachusetts. This is why the stakes in this election are so high. Rest assured that while we have the right to abortion care here in Massachusetts today, if the second we have a majority and Republicans from Mike Pence to Lindsey Graham are saying it over and over, there will be a federal ban on abortion, which will no longer make us safe in the state of Massachusetts. I am the mother of 2 young daughters. And I have to tell you, I wake up every day thinking about how they're living with less rights, or could be living with less rights than I grew up with. That is wrong. We are taking our country backwards. We must codify Roe, and I would like to just know if my opponent would codify Roe. We took that vote on the floor, and we're likely going to take it again.
30 seconds.
It looks like my opponent received a memo from the Democratic Party that to say, call all of your opponents and say that they celebrated the decision. I did not celebrate the decision, Congresswoman. I don't know where you're getting that. Look, the Congresswoman supports unrestricted abortion. That means that you can kill a baby the second before he was born. Look, the CDC's, the last recorded statistics with the CDC is that over 38% of aborted babies are African American. Over 22% are Hispanic, and 8% Asians. So, Congresswoman, I don't know where you're coming from, but it sounds like to me that you like killing minority babies. And if you want to do that,
30 seconds.
Yeah, you pressed a line there. So I am the only person on this stage that has actually had a baby, and had a miscarriage. That by denying life-saving abortion care, reproductive care to women, you are putting women's lives at risk. Women deserve better. The people of this district and the families of this district deserve better.
Congresswoman, I was raised by my mother. I grew up with 3 sisters. I'm married to my wife, my beautiful wife, Leah Carey, and I have 3 daughters. And I will protect women's rights and equality and opportunities at every given time. But here's a response to your question. It's a moot point in Massachusetts because we have already codified role in Massachusetts. That has already happened. And you represent the district and the state.
Congresswoman, 30 seconds.
I think the point here, Dean, is all care, reproductive care, whether we live in Massachusetts or not, is going to be moot if there is a federal ban. We need to send legislators down to Washington that are going to codify Roe, not vote for a federal ban on women's right to choose.
Congresswoman,
we need to move on. We need to move on. Shakira.
With the sharp rise in inflation driving up the cost of living in almost all areas, what do you believe a fair rate would be for the federal minimum wage?
Senator.
what was the question?
With the sharp rise in inflation driving up the cost of living in almost all areas, what do you believe a fair rate would be for federal minimum wage?
Well, that's a hypothetical question that needs to be looked at. You need to have data to support any kind of increase in the minimum wage, especially on the federal level. We saw when they increased the Social Security by 8%, they didn't do it blindly. They did it because they looked at the cost of living. They looked at the current rate of inflation. They also looked at, they forecast the future of the core inflation rate. And they came with the 8% for Social Security. The same thing that we need to do with the federal level minimum wage. But we have to be very careful because every state is different. You can't compare Massachusetts to some state in the Midwest. You can't compare Florida to some state in the Northwest because economically they're different. So if you set a standard federal increase in minimum wage, it may hurt a state or it may help another state. So we have to be very careful. We have to look at the data before we do that.
Look, a big part of the things that we've passed in the last couple of years have been around increasing wages, creating good paying jobs that have family-sustaining wages. I, of course, voted for the $15 minimum wage down in Washington. And we have to do more. We have to keep pace with inflation, just like we do for our seniors who are on Social Security. We have to make sure that we're giving the types of benefit that allows them to stay out of poverty, which is the reason why Social Security was put there in the first place. One thing I think that we can be proud of, and I think one thing that we have to continue doing as we think about the infrastructure bill and so many other packages, is that we've incorporated, whether it's project labor agreements, fair living wage that our unions have grown accustomed to in this state. We have to increase the wages. We have to create those good paying jobs so that people can support their families. And that is what I am committed to continue doing if I'm your representative.
Let's move on to our next question, Mike Carpentier.
How will you work to build productive relationships across party lines?
Congresswoman.
I do that every day. I sit on the bipartisan working group, which is an informal group of Democrats and Republicans who get together for breakfast every single Tuesday. We work together, rank and file members working on issues. It's where I've gotten the co-sponsorships from Republicans to pass the MAID Act, which ends the stigma for getting the care that folks need for substance use disorder and getting medication-assisted treatment. I've worked with Republicans on sewage, on retirement savings, and I'm going to continue. I mean, look, there is common ground to be had in Washington. You have to have those conversations. You can't be just giving the Fox News talking points every day, walking around and causing division. You've got to get together in a room and solve problems. And that's what I've done since I've been in Congress, and I'm going to continue to do that because that's the way we heal our country.
Look, you are not going to get any Fox News talking points from me. But would you prefer Fox News talking points or CNN talking points? I will put my bipartisan relationship record in the state Senate up against my opponents any day, because I have a record of working with people across the aisle. She doesn't. She voted with Nancy Pelosi 100 times. She supported Joe Biden 100% of the time. You know, I have a private sector experience where I've managed people and projects across the world. And I've communicated, interacted with people of all different backgrounds. That's the kind of relationship that I have built. That's the kind of person that I would bring to the U.S. Congress. And I know how to work with people. I promise you that. I will get things done.
On the problem of bipartisanship, one of the things that we're increasingly faced with in this country is a division between agreement on basic facts. And in the U.S. poll conducted earlier this spring, we found that nearly 40% of Democrats said that Donald Trump was definitely or probably not the winner of the 2016 election, and that 70% of Republicans said that Joe Biden was definitely or probably not the winner of the 2020 presidential election.
It was stolen.
Who won the 2016 and 2020 presidential elections? I believe we're doing Congresswoman Trahan. No, Senator first.
Sure. Thank you, Professor. Here's what I know, Professor. I know that President Trump is no longer the president. I know the current president is President Biden. I also know that I'm not running against President Trump or President Biden. I'm running against Congresswoman Trahan. And there are more important issues that we should be talking about. We should be talking about inflation. We should be talking about creating jobs. We should be talking about how people are going to pay for their electricity and their oil fuel this winter. But we're talking about a person who doesn't exist in the political arena right now.
I'm happy you asked the question, and I'm happy you opened up with the question of whether we would accept the results of this question, but it's a really sad question that we have to ask in these times, isn't it? We've seen people undermine our scientists, our elections, climate change, and those are dangerous conversations because it's just not accurate. There's only one truth, and we can't be having everybody's version of truth floating around. I've been working to hold big tech accountable with my Republican colleagues so that we stop the spread of disinformation and misinformation. Disinformation that led to an attack on our U.S. Capitol. I was there That is the truth.
We need 30 seconds on that.
Professor, what is dangerous is us censoring people's ability to speak their mind and protest peacefully.
A little bit more, because I've heard this before. Which do you think is more important in a democratic republic? Free and fair elections, or an unmitigated, unregulated speech?
What a question.
Oh, I think
No, I don't want to know. If you have to make the choice, no, this is the argument he's making. Calm down. Which one is more important to you? I want to hear what the Congresswoman thinks too. The question is, you say which one is more important to you? A set of free and fair elections, or an environment of unregulated speech?
False
Which one
choice.
What?
What is that?
I'm asking just...
Professor, you're asking me a question that has two answers to it. One is, everyone agrees with a fair election, right? But at the same time, everyone in this room agree that they have the protection of freedom of speech.
Yes.
We have freedom of speech in this country, and it must always be protected. This is what can't be protected. Insurgents marching up the steps of the Capitol to stop our electoral process. It is a threat to overturn our government. And the best thing we did that night, the brave men and women who endured that attack, they marched back into that Capitol over broken glass and they certified our election.
Courtney, I believe is next. Courtney Mayor.
Assuming your party is in the minority in Congress after this year's election, how will that impact how you approach representing the district, and what specific measures do you plan to introduce?
Congresswoman, 1 minute.
Thank you. I'm going to approach the job the exact same way. First of all, my job is here in the district. I move around my district all the time, and I listen to people. I don't get my priorities from CNN or Fox News or talking points that come from way up on high. I get my priorities and my agenda from people in this room, everyone, not just the people who vote for me, all of you. I listen to everyone. It's the reason why I'm fighting for mental health care in our country, to fight the opioid epidemic. It is what informs my legislative agenda. And so I'm going to keep reaching across the aisle, working with people that might not expect me to come and seek them out, so that we can find solutions to today's biggest problems.
Professor, I expect the Republican Party to take over Congress.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And here's what is going to be good for this state. I anticipate to be the first Asian American U.S. Congress person from this state elected to the U.S. Congress. And as a Republican, do you imagine that? The publicity that would come to the state, the great things that I can do for the state and the people in this district and across the Commonwealth, that is what is going to happen. And I promise you, Massachusetts will be on the map come November 8th when I'm elected as your U.S.
Excellent questions. But I know this one isn't in the stack because I read them before. One of the things that we've seen during the pandemic and coming out of it is not only a surge in deaths from COVID-19, but also surging deaths from opioid overdoses, and even more troubling, an even larger surge in deaths of alcohol abuse. How will you address these broad crises of public health as a congressman? Senator.
Professor, that's a great question. And I think one of the things that we need to look at is also involving the tremendous amount of fentanyl that is entering our country through our border. And we have a border crisis right now that is allowing, and my opponent has done nothing, has allowed close to 4 million illegal immigrants into this country. And let me take that back. They should be, I should use the term unsupervised entries. And at the same time, there has been well over 200 million pills of fentanyl coming to this country. And that translates to close to 300 people dying of overdose on a daily basis. That's a crisis, and we need to solve that. And if we don't solve that, that is going to become an epidemic that's going to increase the rate of suicides.
There's no question that we're seeing a mental health crisis that was there before COVID, but has only been exacerbated by COVID. Our suicide rate is up, substance use disorder. We put in place a number of programs, funding programs, suicide prevention programs, mental health and wellness programs. the ability to get telehealth to more people so that they have more access to the treatment that they need. You know, this is an issue that is going to play out not just in the next year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, and we need to commit ourselves to the long haul. And in terms of the fentanyl, look, we stop fentanyl at our border using 21st century solutions. We use it by using surveillance and technology. That's what works. That's what we're investing in at our border, not a big dumb wall that doesn't do anything to stop the
Professor,
Do you want 30 seconds?
30 seconds. Everything that the Congresswoman just said, I've done it all in the State Senate. I've supported mental health. You know, we've increased funding to facilities to provide mental health care to people. We've created many programs, but you have to root cause the problem. The root cause is to prevent fentanyl from coming into this country. And you have to
keep investing in our border, 21st century solutions. But if you were to talk about the root cause of the mental health crisis, look, it's heavy. Our students, our young people, we're sitting here at the University of Massachusetts at Lowell. They have to deal with the fact that no Republican wants to take action on the climate to make sure that their planet is healthy. Their rights are being taken away systematically, and the women in the room might have the right to choose someday. They have to deal with the fact that our democracy is under attack by election deniers. So we do have to get to the root cause of mental health. Thank you for bringing it up.
Obviously, get to Shakira's question.
What issues or policy positions do you and your opponent agree on?
Congresswoman Trahan.
Well, that is a great question. You know,
1 minute only, please.
I imagine that if Dean and I were ever in a room by ourselves, that we could find common ground on a couple of issues. I'm sure that maybe it would surprise me if we'd be more than a couple. Because I found, you know, with working with Republicans in Washington, I have been surprised by that on gun legislation. Look, we've had mass shooting after mass shooting, and there has been no action. Republicans and Democrats came together to pass the first gun reform bill in generations. That's what keeps me hopeful. That's what keeps me jumping out of bed every day and trying my hardest to find people to work with. And I would do the same thing with Dean.
And again, just
I'm
1
going to
minute.
spend my minute. Professor, I have no idea how the discussion on mental health issue translated into climate change and but you know, to the question, the Congresswoman and I have nothing in common. But because of who I am, I will guarantee you that I can sit down and even work with her. So that's my answer to your question.
Oh,
Vice President Yeh.
Cannabis is legal for adult use in 19 states and for medical use in 36 states. Massachusetts has seen more than $3 billion in adult use marijuana purchases since the market came online in November 2018, generating $170 million in tax revenue. It is expected that legal cannabis sales will reach $33 billion in the U.S. by the close of 2022. Under federal law, cannabis is still considered a Schedule I substance under the Controlled Substances Act of 1970. Are you in favor or opposed to changing the federal law to allow adult use marijuana purchases?
Senator.
Thank you, Professor. When I was in the State Senate, I sat on the Cannabis Commission, and I helped craft many of those policies. And to your point and to your question, on the federal level, we should follow the lead of Massachusetts, and I believe it's time. It's time that we follow the lead and all the regulations and policies that we place in the state of Massachusetts. It doesn't make sense with the federal law as it is now to ban and to punish people for the use of cannabis or marijuana.
Okay.
I agree, and I would go one step further, only because Republicans didn't join us in the Safe Banking Act, which would actually give the financial infrastructure. Because this is state by state and there's a patchwork of state laws, there is no federal infrastructure for financing these small businesses, paying in cash always. It's just not sustainable. I voted for the Safe Banking Act. We're still trying to pass it, not just through the House, but also through the Senate, and I would hope that my opponent would also support that bill.
All right. Courtney Mayer.
Would you support expanding the number of justices serving on the Supreme Court?
Congresswoman Trahan.
Look, I think Supreme Court reform is overdue. We have an extreme Supreme Court bench at the moment. We had Supreme Courts that during their confirmation hearings, they lied to the American people. They lied about what they would do, about Roe v. Wade, and now we've got an extremist bench. We've got people who are losing rights. We have a bench that doesn't represent the views of the majority of Americans who live in this country. So, look, I think right now it's all on the table. Term limits for judges, expanding the bench. I am open to figuring out how to fix and give credibility back to the Supreme Court.
It sounds to me that the Congresswoman is a SCOTUS denier. When the Supreme Court had the majority of Democrats or liberal leaning, I wasn't mad. Nor am I mad now. It just happens. So I think the number of Supreme Court justices is fine. I wouldn't change it at all.
Congresswoman Trahan, you'll go first, and Senator, you'll finish up.
These are our closing remarks.
Yeah, your closing remarks. Let's move on.
Well, thank you, everyone.
That was a fast guy.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. I think you can see that there are very clear differences between my opponent and me. I'll end where I began, which is I've lived in this district my whole life. I grew up in a family that did not have much, and that's why I'm so oriented to helping hardworking families every single day, creating better paying jobs, making sure that we have safe communities, making sure that we're reducing the cost so that we keep money in people's pockets where it belongs. I have a track record on this. The infrastructure bill is going to create great jobs on every level of our economy. The CHIPS and Science Act is going to fund K-12 STEM programs so that we prepare our young people for the jobs of the future while we bring American manufacturing and semiconductors back to the United States. We have a lot to be proud of. The Inflation Reduction Act, which is the biggest climate change policy in generations. Finally, accelerating us. You want to talk about energy dependence, getting us off of fossil fuels and moving us to clean energy while creating more good jobs that Massachusetts is perfectly situated to do. It has been an honor to represent you in the Congress, and I humbly ask you for your vote on November 8th.
Senator Dean.
Professor, first of all, thank you very much. And to the voters, my opponent and I are very different in everything from our backgrounds to how we provide public service. My father was a 25-year South Vietnamese Army officer. My mother was a small business owner. And as an infant, I survived the war, and I survived the dangerous ocean while people around me perished and died on a boat as we fled communism. I spent my toddler years in one of the roughest refugee camps in the world, waiting for my green card application to be approved. I'm an immigrant. Your story is my story, and I'm running for the US Congress because I feel that this country is turning into the communist country that my family and I fled. Yeah! And her Democrat colleagues have taken control of your money, freedoms, and life. And they have destroyed our economy, your future, and they are on the path to destroy our great nation and the American dream. Now, we are living in a very challenging time created by them. But we can fix all this. We can reduce inflation, lower oil and gas prices, put America first, not China and Russia, put Americans first, not illegal immigrants, support our law enforcement and public safety, and protect parental rights and your constitutional freedoms. And when we do that, we are going to make America safe. We are going to have a strong economy. We are going to make sure that the government is accountable to the people, and then we are going to build a future based on freedom. And if you have had enough, I ask you to join me and make history, and I would be proud and honored to have your vote, because I'm the only candidate here that will protect your life, liberty, and happiness.
Let's have a round of applause for our students, please. I want to again thank you all for joining us, and thank the Chancellor and the University for hosting this debate. The last thing I'll remind all of you to do is be sure to get out and vote, or request your absentee ballot and mail it in as soon as possible. Thank you.
Very good. Hey, we're going to have pictures over here.